And you are with us here once again for SCW Rewind. It must be Throwback Thursday. We're going to be talking WCW and Monday and Nitro, going all the way back to 1995, where the big boys play. My name is Steve. I'm joined in a hot seat by the one and only George Jones. George, how are you doing on this Thursday afternoon?
I'm fine, thank you for having me here, Steve. Looking forward to discussing 1995 again. What a fantastic year. It's going to be another fantastic edition of the podcast yet again.
Absolutely, indeed. In fact, we've got two episodes we're going to cover, as we do usually for Monday Nitro, and it's the two shows before the World War III pay-per-view. And good news, we're going to be covering the World War III pay-per-view if you're interested in the pay-per-view edition next time on the SCW Rewind. So, without further ado, we've got the first show, which I believe is on November the 13th. It takes place in Jacksonville, Florida, which, of course, was actually pre-recorded on the same week as the November 6th edition, which we discussed on the episode last week. We started off on the episode with the commentary to booth table. We had, of course, Eric Bischoff, we had Steve Montgomery-Michael, and we had Bobby Heenan as usual. Eric Bischoff reminding us, of course, about the World War III pay-per-view, the main event. 3 rings, 60 superstars, one battle royal in those 3 rings will eventually lead to 1 ring, and will crown a brand new world heavyweight champion. Bobby Heenan, of course, reminds us that means if Hulk Hogan, of course, the #1 draw for WCW, of course, if he's going to win it, he's got to eliminate 59 other men. He can't just be given this opportunity. He, like everyone else, is going to have to sort of earn this opportunity to be world champion once again. And Steve Montgomery-Michael, of course, was there. And, of course, Pepe is with him. And what I love about this, Pepe dressed up as Superdog this week. We had a little cape and everything. And, of course, it's superhuman wrestling. A great way to open the show. I mean, of course, reminding us the importance of the pay-per-view, not mucking about, giving us an excuse that we need to tune in for World War III. And that's where our destination will be for a brand new world champion.
Yeah, a really good start to the show, definitely. It's where it needed to be.
Absolutely, indeed. And they threw us over to in the Dungeon of Doom, where Hulk Hogan's there once again, still dressed in black at this point, and he's got a black mask as well to go with a black robe. He says that the darkness in the Dungeon of Doom, they shake with fear. They're afraid of Hulkamania. He says that, of course, in Nitro tonight, Macho Man, who's also dark and dressed in black, is going to deliver the head of Ming. He is the top and the first on their long list of who they're going to get revenge on. But he feels there's a strange presence with the relationship of Sting and Lex Luger. What happened with them the previous week, for those that obviously are not aware, Sting refused to let go of a Scorpion Deathlock, and Lex Luger, of course, who was a part of the Dungeon of Doom, come to the ring and was the guy that got Sting to release it, and they left together. So that's his reasoning for why he feels a strange presence with those two. He wants to know if Sting is on the dark side or the good side, and he says that we are going to find out. And he said that if it's the dark side, the name of Sting is going to go to the top of that list. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that this is interesting TV. I think that if you look at the detail of the promo, it's decent. But it's kind of a weird direction that they've taken Hogan in, because not only are we getting a dark side, we're also now getting this side that's kind of almost the same as the Dungeon of Doom. Is it a bit too samey for you, or is this just the wacky mind of Kevin Sullivan working its brilliance?
Yeah, I agree with you. It was a comedic skit, to say the least. I think a lot of the promo kind of got lost. There was a lot of irrational ramblings in the promo. I found it quite comedic. I think it was WCW's best answer to Zorro, in my impression, that it was just badly run. It looked like it belonged in the 70s rather than this. And the fact that Hulk Hogan's coming off of getting destroyed at Halloween Havoc, I would have thought that they would use this time really to try and build him up again. But it was okay. It did what it needed to do. He's the focal point of the pay-per-view again, going into World War III, so it makes sense. But yeah, I thought it was funny. I kind of lost any interest in it, taking it seriously, really.
Yeah, I would say there's not a lot of seriousness that can be taken from it. It kind of feels like, you say, quite comedic, and it's not something you really want for your top star, really, is it?
No, definitely. I think the thing is, if you look like this in the old times, you want your baby face has been beaten up previously. You want him to come out sort of angry and want to get some sort of revenge. Whereas it was almost like Hulk Hogan was just a yes man. And following on from his skit last week where he was with Macho Man and that random guy, this just seems to fit the build of Hulk Hogan kind of being underbooked a bit.
Yeah, I agree. And I kind of feel that as well. I was okay with all the dark sort of like the Hogan dressed in black. I thought that made a point, but I kind of feel that this is one level too far. I feel that now this is going in a direction that just, it doesn't suit, it doesn't fit. And I look forward to seeing the future direction of Hogan, because I mean, obviously, spoiler alert, we are aware of the days ahead where we get the New World Order, where it kind of feels like this is done more properly, and we get Hogan, I suppose, good again in the meantime. And he is good at this point, just in the dark clothing. But I'm ready for a change now. I kind of feel that this is starting to get a little bit stale for my liking, if I'm being brutally honest. But what I did like was when we got back to the commentary table, Bobby Heenan is just genius. And I just love sometimes how he can just come out with these things and think that it comes across with the most credibility ever. He says, I've got a prediction for World War III. I predict that Hulk Hogan is going to be the first to be eliminated. Out of all people, you can think of every jobber under the sun in WCW, but no, Hogan will be the first out. It's just absolutely genius, and for one of the many reasons why we love Bobby Heenan. Absolutely fantastic. We'll go into the first match of the evening, which at least is good for continuity nonetheless. We've got Meng going to be taking on Macho Man Randy Savage. Meng with the Taskmaster, and I believe Jimmy Hart as well is with him at ringside. Savage doesn't come though via the traditional route through the Nitro down the entranceway. He comes from the crowd. He jumps over the barricade from the fans. He's also dressed in black, comes into the ring and jumps Meng. He's sort of on top for quite a while, but we see that obviously Jimmy Hart comes out and Taskmaster, they kind of get distractions in there. Meng gets himself where he's on top for a little while in this match. We get towards the end, and obviously the Taskmaster once again wanting to be a distraction for the referee. But this time we see that Jimmy Hart is on the apron, and Meng ends up going into Jimmy Hart, which leads for Savage to make the comeback. We get the top rope elbow for the 1, 2, 3. But that's not it for that. The segment does continue. We see a Dungeon of Doom attack after this. Shark, the first one in to make the attack on Randy Savage, and it follows up with Lex Luger coming down to the ring, attacking Savage on the outside, and also attacking specifically Randy Savage's arm, particularly hooking it around the ring post a couple of times as well. So a lot of damage done for Savage here, going towards into World War III. Clearly his conditioning is not going to be good. It does help build further for Savage and Luger, which is a positive here with this rivalry continuing. But for the whole segment itself, George, I'd like to know your feelings first on the match. How was the match for you?
It was okay. I think it kind of did what it needed to do. Randy Savage got the win here, which makes sense going into World War III. I like the build-up on Lex Luger, Randy Savage. You're further on, carrying on with that. That's been going on many months now. You're carrying on building that. Considering they're going to have a match at the pay-per-view, that makes sense. Sharp making the cameos was a bit typical, a bit predictable. But this was an okay match. I think the only thing I would say, I was very surprised that Lex Luger and Sharp attacked the arm, really, because I thought Savage apparently legitimately had like an arm injury, so it kind of made sense. You're really thinking that this would be sort of a way to take Savage out of sort of up and coming matches, to go and have that surgery. He looks like he needs, if that makes sense. But it did what it needed to do, really. I don't know what your thoughts were.
I mean, the other thing I found a bit surprising is you said they went for the arm there and the legitimacy of meant to have an arm injury, but also Savage had a problem with the ribs from what they've been building on previously. So at this point, Savage has become almost like a walking wounded. He's been attacked and taken out in a number of different areas and ways here. So it really clearly makes you feel that Savage here is almost a write-off for what's going to go on going forward. He's clearly the underdog in this story and the backup player here for Hogan and potentially for Sting, depending on obviously what happens with them going down the line, which we will go into more detail with Sting and Hogan in this episode. An interesting thing. Like I say, it does what it needs to do. It's certainly an interesting scenario here. I mean, the Dungeon of Doom clearly have got so many members here, and I don't know. I just don't take the certain ones, the undercard guys like Shark, Zodiac. I don't take them so seriously.
I'm afraid they're filler, aren't they? That's the problem. They're almost like the sort of spare parts in this stable. And to be fair, going towards sort of this part of the year, they are slowly starting to wean out the Dungeon of Doom in WCW. I think they're using them less and less, which is kind of a relief to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, they have a point where you kind of can enjoy some of their craziness on the show, but the takeover of it and having the whole show based around it is a bit much. And a lot of the members were, like you have said previously, they're kind of comedic. They're kind of like the feeders to the stable to get you towards the top end. You know, you need the people that can do the job. But so they have quite many of them. And like you say, it's good that they start filling them out and releasing one or two of them from that stable over to Pastors New or to different roles within WCW. But we're going to move on next anyway, and we're going to be talking about Kensuke Sasaki having a match against Chris Benoit. I believe you've got some details about this for us, Lewis, before we go into the match itself.
Yeah, really interesting point about this show. So while this show took place, the WCW wrestlers were actually based in Japan, and it was on this very date that Kensuke Sasaki actually beat Sting to win the United States title. So it's kind of weird thinking about the fact that Kensuke Sasaki loses in this match to Chris Benoit. That same night, he's actually sort of in Japan winning the title. It's quite funny how it's portrayed and how it plays out a bit.
Absolutely, and they did actually make mention on commentary that he would have a United States Championship match this week. He obviously didn't claim at that point if and where and when. But do you think it's a bit of an interesting book? Because, spoiler alert, Chris Benoit is the winner of this one, hits his Dragon Suplex for the victory. And I thought it was a solid match between these two, actually, with the time that they were given. But do you think it's a bit of a strange booking decision? Because Sasaki, like you say, wins the United States Championship there, but loses in this particular match. Is that a bit of a strange booking move?
Yeah, I agree. I think the finish is a couple of layers to this. So you've got the fact that Benoit and Sasaki are clearly testing the waters, ready for their World War III match that's going to happen. I think the fact that also that they're trying to get Sasaki over with the American audience to a certain point. I don't think the audience would have been that aware of him. But this was an okay match, and I think the problem they had really with this was they've been building Chris Benoit up as kind of the fourth horseman, so they didn't really want to give him this loss here. They wanted to make it seem that he's even and he's equal. So at this point, obviously the way they play it out, Kensuke Sasaki isn't the United States champion at this point. But it's a strange way, the fact that he can lose to Chris Benoit, yet he's able to beat Sting. Sort of, it's just a crazy sort of way to get a win, if that makes sense. Not a crazy way to get a win, but a crazy way to sort of go up the card, it seems.
Absolutely. It's almost as if the win comes from out of nowhere. You like to see someone built for that position. I mean, if you look at the modern day way, it's almost like looking at Jinder Mahal in 2017. Had not really, I mean, yeah, okay, maybe not been, Jinder's been in the company a lot longer, but had not done a lot, and then all of a sudden just jumps straight up the card and beating one of your top guys. It almost comes out of nowhere and takes you by surprise. So it is an interesting booking technique, but like you say, Chris Benoit has been announced as the fourth member of the Four Horsemen, so I suppose at this point they want to make that stable as strong as possible. So perhaps a bit of a booking hole here from Nitro here and from that side of things, but at the same time, a fun match to watch nonetheless between these two. And as we say at this point, then Sasaki does become United States champion overseas. And of course, it frees Sting up, because I think it's probably, we agreed from the start here, it was strange to have Sting as a mid-card champion within WCW at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you, definitely.
Definitely. Well, we will move on then in the meantime, and we've got a television championship match to discuss next. So from one title to another, we've got Johnny B. Bad going to be taking on Eddie Guerrero. Interesting enough, there was no music for Eddie Guerrero, I noticed on this, which is a bit of a shame. But we see that basically the two of them have a decent enough encounter for the time given, but it turns out to be a time limit draw. For that reason, Johnny B. Bad retains the belt. Obviously, they want to protect Eddie Guerrero, it feels, at this point. They still sort of have a bit of a shoving encounter after the match, not sort of on side immediately, but eventually they do shake hands and they do have a hug. No social distancing here between these two after the match. But what were your thoughts with this television championship match?
This was a really good match, really excellent. I think this really shows how much of a good hand Johnny B. Bad is at this time. I think that's kind of lost with a lot of people, but I really enjoyed this. Even the fact they went to a draw, it's clever booking. They are really protecting Eddie Guerrero here, and he hasn't lost anything by pushing Johnny B. Bad. But this was a really, really good match, and I think this further gets the television title over, which is good to see.
Absolutely. We don't see so much of the TV title on Nitro at this point, so I completely agree. What I noticed as well, interesting, we mentioned about the Japanese stars here, and Bobby Heenan, they're talking about his relationship with Sonny Ono during this match, and Bobby Heenan's words are exactly, the Japanese have been treated badly in WCW, and he has made a deal with them. And of course, then they say about how it could be money involved, and he said, look, it could be coupons, it could be anything in that envelope, it doesn't have to be money. But he later on does kind of suggest that he's got some yen out of this deal. But clearly they're starting to push to look like they're going to get more Japanese superstars in WCW. And it feels like it could be an exciting period, because Sasaki, I should say, had a great showing in the match with Benoit. And we've seen Jushin Van der Liger involved in a couple of matches as well. Excited to see who else is going to be brought into the fray.
Yeah, it's great to see some fresh talent come into WCW, and certainly the potential room for dream matches down the line is going to be exciting.
Absolutely, indeed. Eric Bischoff confirms the news. Next week on Monday in Nitro, we've got Hulk Hogan versus Sting. Hogan wants it, and we will hear from Sting later in the evening. Wow, you're giving away pretty much one of your biggest matches you can give away on free TV. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a very big match to give away. I'm surprised. I think the fact they've gone to this already, it's very much shows you they're all about the ratings. I was shocked at this. This for me could have been a pay-per-view level match straight away for me at that point. I'm very surprised they're going to give it away on Nitro, particularly with little or no build, if that makes sense as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we even say pay-per-view worthy. I mean, we're even talking it's Starrcade worthy, isn't it? And it's the equivalent of their WrestleMania.
It's a first-time match, if that makes sense at that point. If you look at it, like Hulk Hogan synonymous with WWE, Sting synonymous with WCW, and even if Sting's sort of fallen down the card, losing the United States title, it's still a match that I think as a kid I would love to have seen.
Absolutely. For me, it would have been the dream match. But of course, it is featured later in this episode, so a good reason for you to stick around. But in the meantime, we've got Mean Gene Okerlund in the ring, and he is with the Taskmaster, Jimmy Hart, and the Giant. Jimmy Hart goes on to say that we took the title from Hogan. The only issue is that he's now got 200 Hogan jackets that he's got no use for. A nice little comedic line thrown in there. Basically, not so much to come from this. I just found that the Taskmaster and the Giant both hyping up the Battle Royal, how the Giant is the favourite and how he will walk away as the victor. But what's interesting as well is that, of course, the Taskmaster gets to get his words over. I did find an interesting note and kind of a distracting note here, and I wanted your thoughts on this because I know you're quite a fan of some of the Kevin Sullivan booking. He goes on to have one of his sort of, can we say it, like a fit almost on the ground while the Giant is talking. Is it a bit too distracting? Are we taken away from the Giant in this moment?
Yeah, it's a bit over the top, but this does fit with what we saw at the start of the show of Hulk Hogan. They're related. It's almost like they're hand in hand, if that makes sense, with the whole sort of stupidness of this. This was comedic. I do admit it is distracting. I think, really, I don't think you need Kevin Sullivan and Jimmy Hart both out there with the Giant. I think Jimmy Hart would have been sufficient. Yeah, I think that segment makes it a bit more comedic. I kind of lost the words in the promo by that point. I was laughing as well.
Absolutely. Wrestle Crap 101 right for you there.
Definitely.
We will move on then to what was, the main event match of the evening. Not the main event segment, but main event match. And I really like this. Dean Malenko versus Sting was put together. And they gave Dean Malenko quite a bit of offense. It was a back and forth contest. I thought it was a really good match personally. But Sting did manage to reverse of course, Dean Malenko finisher, which is the great submission, and not used a lot today. The Texas Cloverleaf, we need that brought back today as a finisher, is reversed into a small package for the victory for the Stinger. I thought that it was a solid match between these two. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, very solid match. I'm surprised this was the main event. It's great to see Dean Malenko so far up the card. I think that was a quite nice surprise. But yeah, I liked it. I liked the offense Malenko got. Sting winning here made sense. The only thing I would like to have seen, I would have loved to have seen sort of Hulk Hogan sort of come out. That would have been natural for me, really, to create further heat for their potential match next week on Nitro. But yeah, this was okay. This did what it needed to do. Didn't really feel like a main event to me, though, I have to say.
No, I would agree with that. Perhaps this positioning was a bit of a surprise. I mean, if you look at the matches on the card there, you may have gone for perhaps Savage and Mean perhaps would have been the likely main event of Savage with the name power. But it's great to see Dean Malenko in that position, and it was the better match on the show. So for me, it was probably worthy when you look back at it of being the main event. But we go back to the commentary table. We mentioned about Hulk Hogan there, and that he is brought straight into conversation by Mongo McMichael, and saying that he's going to go down the list of people who betrayed him. But Bobby Heenan and Eric Bischoff actually have a discussion with each other, questioning the relationship with Sting and Lex Luger. Of course, we talked already about it from the previous week. We get to meet Gene Okerlund in the ring with the Stinger, and the Stinger says that I never thought you would knock on my door, Hogan. I'm not a little dog. I'm the big dog. Interesting that we see a lot about the big dog being mentioned there. Sting thinks that he can smooth things out. But he's kind of looking forward also to the match with Hogan next week. I thought this was a solid build. It did what you need to do for a 1 week build to get you going for this match, especially without Hogan being present as well. What were your thoughts of it?
Yeah, I thought it was okay. I thought it did what it needed to do. I would love to have seen more intricacy on the Lex Luger Sting thing that was built the week before. I think that was kind of missing from this part. But yeah, the fact that you've got the answer there, you know you're going to get that match next week, which is great. It's just interesting, as I said, that WWE have gone for this at this point when sort of there's plenty more opportunities to do this match. But it's something to look forward to, I think, definitely for the next Nitro, 100%.
Absolutely. Just to quickly ask you, do you feel then, because I kind of agree with you when you make that point there, Luger is not really mentioned in the promo. It feels that this is the start of what is going to perhaps be a more long drawn out kind of program with these two, or certainly a relationship, whatever it's going to be. Time will tell as we go towards within the Nitro days. But do you think that the questions should have been asked earlier at this stage, or is it okay to leave it for a week or two, let it drag out, let it fester, and let us raise more questions?
I would have liked to have seen it earlier on in the show, if I'm being honest. I think the fact that you had such a big sort of tease to a heel turn last week with Stin, and you didn't follow up on this show, seems to be a lost opportunity. But I just think the problem is WCW got so many things going on at this point. The fact they're going to these big matches straight away, and they're giving away one of the biggest matches in history next week for nothing, it's a big shock. I think they should have really. I think this show kind of was rushed. I know it was taped before, but I think they rushed through a lot of this. They just want to get through to World War III, it seems, at the moment with all these shows.
It kind of feels a lot of that. I mean, particularly with the Nitro shows, because you suggest that. I mean, they've only got 45 minutes when you take the adverts out of it, and it's a classic moment here of saying that WCW could do with a longer time slot, which of course they do eventually get. Is this one of the weeks then you think classically they could have done with the 2 hours or perhaps even a 90-minute show?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think they could have fitted a lot more in. I think there's so many wrestlers that weren't on the show that would have fitted, such as DDP that was doing quite well at that time. You also had some other wrestlers at that time that could have done well as well. I think 90 minutes would have been better, but obviously we do get some more time later on.
Absolutely, indeed. So there's lots to look forward to. As we go off the show, Bobby Heenan does suggest that Hogan is a lost man who is paranoid. Do you think that that's another classic Heenan line there to finish us off?
Heenan's on the money, isn't he? Yet again, yeah, spot on. I think he's just really comedic. I love the way that he plays a classic heel commentator, which is really missing these days in wrestling.
Absolutely, spot on. I thought overall this show was okay, if I'm going to be brutally honest. I thought the in-ring work was actually perhaps a lot better overall than perhaps we've seen in previous weeks on Nitro, particularly when we've had 4 matches thrown in here. Like we say, some of the storytelling is a little bit bonkers, but I think it is all the focus here is World War III and who that champion's going to be. And they are building up towards that. They are making it seem like a big deal. So overall, I think they get a pass from me on this one. And I do say that this show is definitely worth checking out if you wanted to go and check out on the network.
Yeah, I think it's a very good show. Apart from the opening match, I think all the other matches really delivered. They felt sort of quality, really, to me.
Absolutely. How did they do in the ratings, George?
Okay, so interesting point of this. So this show drew a disappointing 2.0 rating compared to Raw. Raw got 2.6. Raw's main event was Razor Ramon defending. The main event was Razor Ramon versus Sid for the Intercontinental title, and the fact that that's more over than what they delivered is kind of interesting. What do you make of that?
Interesting. Well, I mean, Sid at this point, if I'm not mistaken, had been flirting around the main event area. In fact, I'm actually surprised to see that he was in the Intercontinental Championship picture, really. But him and Razor feels like a big match. I feel that that's definitely perhaps more of a watch-worthy main event, perhaps than Sting versus Dean Malenko, if I'm being brutally honest, and more over than Savage versus Ming. No disrespects to Ming, but I kind of feel of the matches that has perhaps the big money draw of a match, just purely because of the fact that they're more level, if that makes sense, rather than going, well, that guy's clearly going to win. There's a question mark between Razor and Sid who would win. But, I mean, looking at it overall on the shows, I mean, the WCW, for me, are doing a good job in building, and they are within the conversation here. But as you say, they have had higher ratings in recent times. So it does go to show a little bit that something was missing from one of the previous weeks for fans to switch the channel and go to the other show, so to speak. But what are your thoughts on this?
I think there's a couple of points to this. So I think the fact that Nitro didn't have a marquee match built up from the start, maybe they kind of probably lost potentially some ratings there. I think also another element, the main event on Raw had a special guest referee in 1-2-3 Kid. I don't know, obviously that's something different, if that makes sense, special referee. But it's just interesting to see these ratings go back and forth rather than just one promotion winning week after week at the moment.
Absolutely, it certainly has some interest there, and yeah, I mean, it's going to continue as we go throughout. But the question is, I mean, they did that one week. How does WCW bounce back? Of course, they've now, as you said, they've actually announced ahead of time. We've got Sting versus Hogan the next week. You would imagine that those ratings will go up. But before we find out, let's go into the show, shall we? Let's dig into it and give our little bit of knowledge on the Nitro edition, November 20th, 1995. Mongo Michael actually says for us that we've got a pay-per-view quality match, Sting versus Hogan. and we're going to get it for free. They're really hoping on about it. Eric Bischoff says this is the Super Bowl of wrestling. And Bobby Heenan says, I'm rooting for Sting against Hogan. Almost feels that that Sting is almost the question mark of this, of course. So it's absolutely perfectly played into our hands here. We don't know if Sting is the face on the heel, and Bobby Heenan just adding a little bit of fuel to the fire, so to speak.
Yeah, clever words.
Certainly indeed. Well, we've got a first match of the night, which probably doesn't live up to it. We've talked about it before. The Scott Norton versus Shark rivalry continues. That's right. I'm sure a few of you might be excited about that out there. But Shark attacks Scott Norton in the aisle. The brawl begins. Thankfully, this match doesn't go on too long, though. Scott Norton wins with a slam, but I'm going to give him credit. It's meant to be a power slam, I'm pretty sure. And he gets the 1, 2, 3. It's impressive to get Shark off the ground and hit into that sort of maneuver. So I thought a decent finish, but not really my type of match. And I hope this is the end of these two. Your thoughts, George?
Yeah, horrible match to open the show. I think it just clearly made the crowd sort of flat. Slightly concerned at the end that Shark and Norton were pushing each other once again, so I'm hoping we're not going to see any more of this. But I really think this belonged on Saturday night or WCW Pro instead of Nitro, really.
Absolutely. I think it's not when... They may be the big boys, but it's not where they should play. Like you say, one of those shows would have been better suited. We've got Mean Gene Okerlund, and he's got the Taskmaster and Jimmy Hart. Almost feels like a weekly occurrence, this sort of going on now. But Jimmy Hart is talking about Sting this week, and he says, tonight is your night to beat Hogan. You are best friends. But now we've got a new best friend in the Macho Man. You were on Thunder in Paradise, but when were you asked to be on Baywatch? You wasn't. Savage was the one that was there. And the Taskmaster then goes on to say that we've waited a long time to have Hogan in the ring with many of us at the same time, which of course goes on to talk about World War III. He's mainly promoting the Battle Royal once again, which of course is a good time to be promoting it because of course it is actually on the weekend. You need to plug that pay-per-view. So Jimmy Hart does the work for tonight. Taskmaster does the work for the weekend. It kind of feels like that they get everything in a short space of time and gives you the excuse to stick around.
Yeah, you're further creating seeds ready for the main event, which is clever.
Absolutely. Interestingly enough, though, Eric Bischoff reminds us about the Macho Man Randy Savage. Now, of course, he debuted a year earlier in 1994 on Saturday night and, of course, made his actual debut of what side he was going to be on at the Starrcade with Hogan. And he said that when he came, he was there to become the world heavyweight champion. All the question marks are on Sting, but Eric Bischoff put some questions on Savage. Good move.
I think it creates a question of interest, particularly when you look back at Randy Savage being sort of such a big heel in WWF in the early 90s. I think that kind of goes back to that a bit. But yeah, I get it. You don't really know who to trust again, which is very similar to kind of what happened to Halloween Havoc, really, in that respect.
Absolutely. They're causing a lot of mystery and intrigue. The only thing I would say is, like you said, there's so much going on. It gets to a point where you start thinking, where am I going to get lost soon? Because you don't know. There's so many people questions marks of their face or heel. And even Hogan with a dark side a little bit. You kind of start thinking, well, where and who am I meant to be rooting for?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we'll move on in the meantime. And we've got what's planned to be a great match here, I feel. Eddie Guerrero against Ric Flair is the advertised match. Doesn't quite go down like that, though. But let's start off with my favourite segment of every week. We get a bit of disco fever. That's what the Disco Inferno, as per usual, interrupting, coming out on a stage. And he actually shows off an album, which, of course, the commentator said he was trying to flog outside of the arena for $49.99. Money well spent, if you ask me. But the music doesn't last very long. Eddie Guerrero gets some music this week and chases off the Disco Inferno as per usual. Flair's music hits as the opponent, and Ric Flair is coming down to the ringside, but he comes down dressed in a suit, and he's got Brian Pillman, who is dressed for competition instead. Ric Flair gets on the microphone and he says, look, wrestling you, Eddie Guerrero, that's a mistake. He says, I'm focused on the Stinger, which of course is the match they're going to have at World War III. He says, Arn and Chris Benoit are on the jet with the champagne and the girls. He says, Brian Pillman, you can take care of my light work. And the match goes on between the two, and both on the top rope at one stage. Brian Pillman actually gets pushed off by Eddie Guerrero, and we get the frog splash for the 1, 2, 3. We'll break this down into parts, and first off, we need to get your thoughts, George, on the advertised match of Ric Flair and Eddie Guerrero, but getting Brian Pillman instead. I'm guessing there must have been a sense of disappointment here.
No, I was really happy, to be fair. I think the fact that although Ric Flair would have been a classic in this match with Flair de Guerrero, I still think Brian Pillman is a very good substitute. He's still a fantastic in-ring athlete at that point.
Yeah, I mean, he really is. And these two did have a good match, I felt. And I suppose Ric Flair, I mean, he's the dirtiest player in the game. He is a heel. And, what way to get the crowd to boo you more than say, well, I'm not competing. I've got this guy to do it for me.
Yeah, I think the thing is, if you kind of look at it, I think they had to do this. It kind of makes sense. Ric Flair's obviously coming off of an injury, supposedly. He injured himself beating Joey Maggs, supposedly, who was a jobber. So it kind of makes sense, really, to have Pillman here. And Pillman and Guerrero have got such similar styles. But I really thought Guerrero got a big win here. I was really surprised to see him go over Brian Pillman. It just shows the Eddie Guerrero push is on, and he's still keeping up this win streak. He's getting some big wins.
He's starting to become weekly here on Nitro at this point. I mean, he's been in both shows here. I think he was on at least one of the two shows we mentioned the week before. It feels that Guerrero is someone that's featured heavily on Monday nights, which a lot of superstars struggle to get that Nitro time. Yeah,
definitely. I think the thing that surprised me more is the fact he was able to win with sort of people outside, if that makes sense. You've obviously got Ric Flair there, and the fact that he's beating a horseman. The horseman were meant to be on the up at that point. It's really hard to kind of see this win, but it's great to sort of see such a good match. This was far better than the match we saw earlier on the show.
Absolutely. It certainly brings everyone straight back in, and the big win for Guerrero as well gets the fans out of their seats. We get a recap of Randy Savage with the injury from last week, and Eric Bischoff, like I said there, being the devil's advocate once again with the Savage line. We go on to Big Bubba versus Road Warrior Hawk. Now, not a match I was looking forward to here, but we'll go briefly into it. Bubba takes up his fist. He's got a taped up fist fight with Hacksaw Jim Duggan booked for the World War III pay-per-view. Bubba looks to take to the ropes, so when he's got his hands taped up, Hacksaw is down at ringside, pulls his leg. As Bubba falls down, his face lands on the taped fist, and Hawk rolls him over to get the victory. Built up the match, you could argue does what it needs to do, but for me, this was a bit of a stinker.
Yep. Once again, we're looking at a WWF Superstars match here. This was an absolute comedy, a farce comedy. I think the match was really poor. Highlight of it was when the object fell out, and then he had to make out as if it didn't, which was quite comedic to see. But not a good match, really.
No, we didn't do much. So we will move swiftly on to certainly a match that is going to get a lot of talking points. And what I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to hearing about on this particular show, it is the first encounter between Sting and Hulk Hogan at the main event here of Nitro here on this particular show. And I think the most interesting point is the start of this. Sting comes out in the babyface colours of Hogan. He is wearing the red and yellow. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, very iconic, very different, isn't it?
It certainly is. I mean, literally, Hogan been wearing those colours for years. Hogan has been wearing black. For Sting to come out on this sort of note here, it says a message. It sends the message, I'm on your side a little bit. I'm not a heel. I'm not a bad guy. I'm wearing your colours. But it's also a little bit of a disrespect as well. And probably a reminder to Hogan of how and where he should be and not being this dark character. There's so many different ways that this can be conveyed over. So I find it fascinating. I think it's actually a stroke of brilliance. It's not just a good booking move. I think it's genius on so many different ways. So a lot of props, I feel, just for that moment alone, for me, was one of the big hyped up moments, because the match has not even started at this point, and I'm at the edge of my seat looking forward to it even more now. Savage comes out when Hogan's music hits. Of course, he's got his arm all bandaged up as well, like selling the arm injury that you were referring to. He's pointing to the back to Hogan. He's waving him out. And Hogan does the same thing as what Savage did when he took on Ming. He came out of the crowd, came over the barricade, and come in behind Sting. Sting got his back turned, completely oblivious, but thankfully wasn't attacked from behind. There was a pat on the shoulder at least. Kind of suggests that Hogan, even though perhaps a slightly heelish move or more edgy move, has not gone to the dark side. He could have attacked Sting from behind here, but didn't. I think that was another key moment. Your thoughts?
Very interesting way for Hulk Hogan to come out to the ring. I really like the way that they tease that he's going to be heel here. I like the way that everyone doesn't know whether they can trust him or not. I just thought it was clever, and I really like the way that sort of you're guessing. To me, to a certain point, I wasn't too sure if this match was even going to happen. I like the way they're teasing whether the match is going to happen or not here, which I think is really clever. It keeps people's interest there.
Absolutely. I think so far this has been put to absolute perfection. We did actually get the main event. You said the questions that I thought myself, how is this going to work? Is it going to have a interference? Will we get the classic modern day WWE style where two Dungeon of Doom members come out and we end up in a tag team match? No, we got a lengthy main event. It happened. It happened, everyone. It was back and forth as well, which was interesting. And I kind of felt for lengths of this match that Sting, in one way, was playing a babyface. The fans were certainly more on side when Sting was on top. It felt of the two. Obviously, like you said, we've got the classic WCW versus that old guard WWE guy. But we get to a point where Hulk can't resist it. He's hulking up. The role was reversed, and Hogan's going to come for that big comeback. He gets there. He goes for the leg drop. He misses that leg drop. It's a key moment of that match there where he misses that. You think, well, hang on, the Stinger can do this. He's going to win. He's going to get Hogan here, gets him in the Scorpion Deathlock. You hear Hogan screaming in pain. He says, like, my leg, and I'm in so much pain. But unfortunately, we don't get the clean finish. Of course, the Dungeon of Doom come out. They break it up. We end up with a no contest. We get a lot of the jobbers of the Dungeon of Doom, which Sting and Hogan managed to actually fling them off. No problem. We get the Giant come down to the ring with Jimmy Hart, and the Giant comes in, takes control. He's got his arms around both Hogan and Sting. He's going to lift them both up for the chokeslam. Savage comes in, bandaged up arm and all with a steel chair, hits the Giant in the back with a steel chair. Giant doesn't sell it at all, drops the two guys, turns around and takes out Savage with, I believe my memory serves right, with a chokeslam. Hogan and Sting end up picking up that steel chair and end up running at the Giant, almost like a clothesline motion to knock the Giant over the top rope. So the baby faces aren't standing tall going in towards the World War III, but certainly an eventful end to the show. It's absolute chaos. But does chaos create cash?
Yeah, I think the fact is they had to pay it off like this. They couldn't have either one get pinned. I get that. It was interesting. It was a bit of a mess. I would have much rather seen people running that were important. Obviously, you got the Giant. He's really the only important one there. I really think this was a great opportunity for Ric Flair to come in as well, and obviously attack Sting. I think that would have made sense here. But yeah, this was okay. It kind of does what it needs to do. The fact you're getting the baby faces go out here on a high, that's a nice change, because recently they've been going out of sort of Nitro and pay-per-views sort of always being sort of on the ground, if that makes sense. So no, I enjoyed this ending.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point you make there. The heels have been booked so strongly recently, and there has to be a point where the baby faces make some form of comeback, because it almost becomes unbelievable that they have a chance at the pay-per-view. You have to give them something when it comes to the pay-per-view. And it's very interesting as you go in towards World War III, because, I mean, the belief is that, you know, who is going to be the guy that walks away the world heavyweight champion? I mean, they're pointing at the favourites of being Hogan and the Giant at this point. But of course, like you said, there's so many great superstars involved in that battle royal. There are a lot more questions than answers. And how much of a play would the Dungeon of Doom have? Because all of them involved in the ring at the same time. Will they get Hogan out of there? We'll have to wait and see to the next show. But what I did like is that to finish the show, we did get the Taskmaster and co. surrounding Eric Bischoff and co. at the commentary table. Bobby Heenan's actually, his headset actually breaks, and he actually says that he's going to need insurance going forward. I thought that it was a good way to end the show on the whole. Like you say, the faces coming out on top. We did need to protect. We couldn't have Sting or Hogan losing here. It does open an idea for a rematch as well at a later stage, should they want to do this on pay-per-view as well. So I suppose it's not the worst booking move at, when you look back at it. The big question, though, that we need to ask, George, though, is the ratings. Did this help pop them back up in the ratings battle?
Okay, so even though WWE apparently had a superior show, WCW unsurprisingly won the night. This match drew a 2.5 rating compared to WWE's 2.3 rating. The Hulk Hogan Sting match actually drew lower than the Ric Flair Arn Anderson cage match that happened previously as well. What were your thoughts on that before we go further into Nitro ratings?
Fascinating. It kind of almost shows that, a lot of fans were crying for the Horsemen and were very interested in that Horseman rivalry. But when you've got Hogan and Sting, which are meant to be, arguably the biggest stars of the last 10 years. I mean, you look at Sting, he was the flagship of WCW up until you seeing Hogan and Savage coming in. I mean, has Sting been booked that far down the card that don't believe in this match as much as they did, or are people that tired of Hogan? Because, like we said at this point, Hogan's starting to get booed a lot. So it's an interesting point. It's not a surprise that WCW won on the night. But it is interesting that fans did. I mean, the other question is with other sports going on, of course, like you've got like Monday Night Football and perhaps basketball and stuff like that. They have a lot of other American sports and stuff going on. I wonder if maybe any games like that may have had anything to do with that as well. Maybe if there was a big team playing at the same time, who knows? But it's certainly fascinating indeed to look back at that point you make. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting. Another interesting point is the fact that there's real interest around the industry at this point that Hulk Hogan's starting to lose his ratings draw, the way he's able to affect the crowd, the way he's able to get the crowd in, which is quite interesting. What is quite interesting is what WWF run against this. So WWF did that angle where Owen Hart and Shawn Michaels actually collapses. So the fact that WWF are going so risque, and the fact that WWE at this point, this is off a WWE pay-per-view as well. So I think generally the ratings in the dirt sheets for this week, they're getting canned, if that makes sense. Are you surprised that so little people have watched the show during this week, considering we're off a pay-per-view and we're on the go-home show to a pay-per-view?
It's interesting, really, because like you say, usually you get the pay-per-view bumps, you usually get the interest going in towards, but it all depends on what's going on around it at the time. Like we said, if there was other sports going on, like say, I don't know, like New York Giants or whatever, or if there's, I don't know who was really perhaps the best when it comes to the NFL at that time, but maybe someone was like a Denver Broncos or whoever at the time may have been playing. That can have an impact because football is a big thing for the American market. But yeah, I mean, maybe 95. We look back at 95, particularly with WWF. We look at that as some of the darker days of the company. With WCW, it's a growing brand, and the fact that it's in the conversation really shouldn't be ignored. But at the same time, like you say, that there are changes to what people want from wrestling. And maybe that this is the seeds that start planting for what comes ahead, because a lot of more eyeballs come onto the prize with the changes that are made within both companies. You look with WCW, what they do with the NWO, with that edgy style product, and WWE eventually becomes that product as well that becomes edgy and brings in those attitude kind of characters and brings in the attitude era. I mean, it just goes to show at this point that I think we've had the tried and tested from the 80s. Yeah, we've got these big names and these big name matches, but perhaps what we are seeing, maybe people just want to see a little bit more. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I think the fact that WWE are running such a risque angle here, the fact that you've got Michaels sort of passing out here and having to be given oxygen and people in the crowd thinking it's legit. What's your thoughts of WWE running such a controversial angle to go against this sort of Sting Hulk Hogan dream match?
It's a very controversial angle, particularly for the time. A lot of people would be concerned because, especially at that point, kayfabe was still sort of around in ways. I mean, of course, for those who have watched Dark Side of the Ring this week, it's a fascinating watch with regards to the kayfabe in wrestling, when people are more aware of it being an entertainment rather than a sport. With that idea of the industry. But at this point, I mean, people are still more heavily invested. Where we look at today, everyone's almost not believing a lot of what they see because they think, it's storyline, it's this, it's that. But people still were heavily invested and believed the story, and a lot of things can be sold so well. And we can't underestimate Shawn Michaels, when he was selling that as well. I remember being frightened as a kid, looking at it going, oh my God, is he all right? And it comes down to all of that. And yeah, it's risky, but they wanted to do something to challenge it and to give interest and keep people, I suppose, an eye on their product, and people will tune in next week to check if Shawn is okay.
Yeah, definitely. I think this was a rather interesting go home week, if that makes sense. I think the fact that we've had that dream match now, really looking forward to seeing what they do at World War III when we discuss it next week. I'm sure that'll be an interesting discussion.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a number of matches before, and then we've got the 3 rings, and we've got 60 superstars, which could be a mission to try and name every single one of them. But we will do our best to give us a good of account of everything that happened in that match as possible. I mean, I have watched it. I know you have watched it as well. We've got the notes at the ready, but it's one of those where you look at it and say, well, there's so much going on at the same time in that match. So, you know, we will do our best to keep up with it as well as the commentary team did on that show. But looking forward to talking about that in great discussion next week. But we should say that with this Nitro, would you say it's worth going back on the network to go and check this one out?
Yeah, you have to. First time Hulk Hogan stint. It's an iconic match. It's one of the most iconic matches at that time since Warrior Hulk Hogan. That's the only match for me that feels similar when I was a kid, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I would agree with that as well. I think it's to have that on that show rather than a pay-per-view. I mean, when you look at Hogan, when he came into WCW, I was looking forward to a Hogan Sting encounter. And you go through all them pay-per-views, and yeah, Flair is the first one. There are ones with Vader, but I mean, we had with you know, the Butcher, which was Brutus Beefcake. We had a program there which went on for a couple of pay-per-views as well. So, I mean, Hogan never really got round to facing Sting. And it's very interesting how the Dungeon of Doom kind of took in. It felt like we were never going to get that Sting match. So it's interesting we get it here. It's definitely something that I would suggest is must-see because it's that first time we got it. So, like you say, there's some history in amongst it. But is there anything else you'd like to discuss before we close things off?
No, thank you for having me on the show again.
Well, it's always great to have you on board, George, and thank you everyone for watching. Keep an eye on the channel as always. Like we said, we'll be back next week with the SCW Rewind for World War III. Videos are coming daily, so make sure to go and check them out on the channel here on YouTube. Subscribe right now to keep up to date as well. Thank you to everyone. We're over 400 subscribers. We're working our way up now. The race to 500 starts here. So that's all from us anyway. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time here on youtube.com. And you've been watching SCW Rewind. This has been Monday Night Nitro.